Hi everybody, I'm Mataure. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all doing well. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe down below. Last time I did a video with a cup of tea, you guys were freaking out because I almost burned myself so many times and you guys didn't see me sipping, so you're very concerned. But anyway, we are here. Today I'm hitting you up with something a little bit different. I'm starting a new series on my channel called How Are You Really? In this new series, I want to dive into all the different forms of mental health that affect our people that we just don't talk about. I was given this idea by my gorgeous niece, Wongi, and she reminded me how much we just take our mental health for granted, particularly as Africans. So that's something I want us to explore on this series, so I hope you guys enjoy. On today's episode, I want to talk about something that affects me so personally, and that is grief. Here's a trigger warning. If hearing about loss and grief and everything is going to put you in a bad space, please don't watch this video. I don't want to affect you. I don't want it to upset you any further. So yes, here we go. Today I'm talking about the grief that I experienced and still experience after the loss of my parents. I've never talked about this before. Well, on camera at least. I hardly talk about it as well in person because it's just, it's okay. It's not something that's easy for me to talk about. I don't even discuss this with my siblings, to be honest, for various reasons that I'll get into later. But it's something that I feel that we really need to talk about. The last 2 years have been so painful for so many people out there because of everything that's happening with the pandemic, and I want to just talk about grief. So a lot of my videos are usually very chirpy, very fun, very uppity, but this is not going to be one of those. So if you're not into this kind of thing, it's okay. I understand, but this is for all those out there who are suffering loss and are struggling to cope. So before we get into how I'm coping now and how things are now, I'm just going to go back to the beginning and talk about how everything happened. In 2015, end of 2015, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. So it wasn't really a surprise to anyone, to be honest. He'd been smoking for over 50 years, so it was just one of those. Anyway, he went through 2 rounds of chemotherapy and we realized that it was not working. By the time we caught on, it was at about stage 4, so you can imagine. So anyway, my dad passed in 2016, December the 21st, 22nd. And it was devastating. It was devastating. I'd never experienced a loss so close in my life, and it broke me. It completely broke me. I didn't know up from down. I was terribly depressed, and it took me a long time to cope with that. That time was also, there was a lot of family drama as well surrounding his death and his funeral, which was even more traumatic than his whole illness and passing and all that. It was just a terrible time. Shout out to all those who've taken care of a sick or dying parent. That is another level of trauma. Like completely different. Like there's the grief from losing someone, then there's like the trauma from taking care of a sick parent. That's a whole other topic. But anyway, that happened. At that time, my mom and I grew very close as we were mourning together. It was really painful for us as a family, and in that time, my mom would sometimes complain about like her stomach issues and things like that. And then in April of 2017, she had a hysterectomy as a precautionary measure, and yeah, so that happened. So in July, late July, August-ish, she caught what we thought was a flu and a cold, and she was just really sickly, very weak. And then into August, we realized, no man, something's wrong. Like, what's happening? This cold isn't getting away. And she was just complaining about like slow bowel movements and just generally feeling weak and tired. So at the time, we thought that perhaps it was grief, and you know how grief also affects you physically. We assumed that's what it is, and at that time she started bleeding. So by bleeding, I mean she kind of went on to her periods again, even way after menopause. This suddenly started happening again. So that's when we kind of figured, okay, maybe something's wrong. She got all sorts of tests done. They tested her for pneumonia a couple of times. The tests were coming up negative, but she had fluid in her lungs, couldn't figure it out. That's August into September. At this point, I'm terrified. I'm terrified of losing my mom right after losing my dad. But you know, we're keeping the faith. We were praying. We were doing all the things. And then she was hospitalized at some point. And at that time, I was working in Harare. I got on a bus, I went home. She was in ICU for a couple of days. They drained like 2-3 liters of fluid from her lungs. And yeah, she eventually got discharged. We thought she was going to be okay. And even when I was speaking to her in the hospital, she was like, "Oh, that was quite a scare. That was really scary. But anyway, thank God I'm here, I'm alive." And then 2 weeks after that, things deteriorated. My brother called me in the morning. He's like, "You know what? I think you should come home. I don't know. Mommy's not doing well. She's in a lot of pain." We're like, "Pain? Pain from where? What do you mean? What are you talking about?" And then I got on a bus at about midday, a chicken bus, and halfway through, my phone rings and my brother's calling me. And I knew, like in my heart, I knew. And I picked up the phone. He's like, "Hi, where are you?" At that time, I think I was like in Kwekwe. You know how chicken buses are slow. He's like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "Oh no, I'm in Kwekwe. Oh, this bus is taking time." He's like, "Has anybody called you about anything? Have you received any phone calls?" And at that point, I was like, God, I knew at that time. And he's like, "Well, Mommy's gone. She's gone." That was at about 3 p.m. Woo! Okay, no tears. I'm getting through this, okay? Let me sip my tea. So he called me. I was like, "She's gone." At that point, we had no idea what happened. Honestly, we had no idea. We didn't even know what was making her sick. We had no idea what was going on. This was 9 months after my dad died. No one had a clue. And so we sat down, and my siblings, my brother said to me, "You know what? Let's get a what do you call that thing done? Is it an autopsy? What do you call it? Whatever that thing is. Let's get an autopsy done." There's another word for it. Anyway, he's like, "Let's get an autopsy done so we know, because it's going to haunt us for life for us to find out what happened," because we had no idea. Like, things just escalated very quickly. At the time, I didn't want to do it because I was like, God, I'd just been through another funeral. Like 9 months ago, in this very spot, I was burying my father. Now I'm burying my mother. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want the funeral days to drag on even longer. But we sat down and we discussed it, and we got a post-mortem. That's the word I'm looking for. They got a post-mortem done. And it turns out she had stomach cancer that had spread to her lungs. And that's what was causing the fluid. Guys, after losing my mom, when I say I almost died, I felt pain like I've never felt before in my life. I thought I was going to curl up and die. I lost a lot of weight. I'm going to insert a picture somewhere here. I lost a lot of weight. At that time, at that time I weighed like 62 kgs. I came down to like 55. I was gaunt. I felt the life leaving my body because I was just... It's a pain I can never ever describe. And the thing is, when someone is describing this pain, you can't really imagine how painful it is. Like, it's kind of like flexibility, right? Like, if you've never done the splits before, you can't imagine that your body can do that kind of flexing because you've got no idea. So that's exactly what grief is like, and especially like the pain of losing your mother. Like, losing my father was painful, but losing my mother almost just destroyed me. So at that point began a very, very long journey of grief. I went mad. I went completely mad. I couldn't, like, one thing that people don't talk about when you're going through grief is how unhinged you become. I genuinely became unhinged because I'd want to run out into a field and scream, "Mama, Mama," until she comes, because it's just like you go mad because your body can't, your mind can't understand what happened. Like, she was there and then she wasn't. And I'd want to just like scream her name and call out to her because I couldn't understand that she was gone. One of the most painful times for me was I arrived home. Of course, there's people at home at that point. If you're African, you know how it is. Everyone comes to your house to comfort you. That night, I slept on the couch with my cousins. Some of my friends were there. And the next morning, I woke up early and I saw the sun out. And I realized that that was the first time in my life that the sun had risen and my mom wasn't alive to be there to see it. And the pain I felt at that point was just unimaginable. I'm sorry if I'm tearing up a lot. It's not something I talk about because it's like so fresh. But yeah, so anyway, fast forward. I went through so many things. You know, there's so many things that you go through when you're grieving that you never really expect. Especially if you lose both of your parents. I had such an identity loss because I found out that a lot of my identity was rooted in my parents, and they also almost kind of define me in my head, I guess. And you know, that sense of belonging, like feeling like you belong to people, like your next of kin was always my dad or it was my mom, and then I had nobody. So at that point it became my brother, I know, but it was so traumatic. Like I would sit down and write my name on a piece of paper because to remind myself of who I was, if that makes any sense. So I'd sit and write, my name is Kiddet. So I'd sit and like write facts about myself to try and reconnect with that person that I was. But what I know now is that I'll never ever be the person that I was before grief. It's impossible. So many things about me changed. For example, before grief, I would have written myself off as an extrovert, right? But after that, it completely changed the person that I was. Like now, I call myself an ambivert, but I'm more introverted than I thought. I lost my confidence, I lost my ambition, I lost my self esteem, I lost my sense of belonging, I lost so many things. So, like, even one of my favorite things was going home to Bulawayo, for those who don't know where I'm from. One of my favorite things was going home. And after my parents died, I was like, what's the point? Why should I bother? Like, it's not my home anymore, kind of thing. And my brother stays there and everything. So yes, it's good to go and see him, but for me it now became like I'm going to my brother's house. Like I don't belong here, kind of thing. Not that he made me feel that way at all, at all, at all. But for me, I was just like, what's the point? So it was really really difficult. It was very hard. And you know, the thing about grief is it always pops up in the weirdest things. It could be like a smell or like a song. Like for me, what would get me was a song. So like songs that I used to listen to with my mom, I can't listen to them right now. I can't hear them right now because it's tears. And grief, like it comes and goes, right? So I saw an analogy that said that grieving is like having a piece of luggage, right? That you have to carry with you all the time, 24/7, no matter what you do. So sometimes you wake up in the morning and it's a backpack or it's a handbag or it's like, you know, something light. Other days it feels like a suitcase. Other days it feels like a trunk. So sometimes I wake up in the morning and it feels like that trunk is sitting right on my chest because I can, like, it's so overwhelming. And people like to do this thing. Africans have this thing of saying, oh no, don't cry for her. Don't cry because, you know, she's not going to move on. But I'm like, of course I'm going to cry. And it's very unhealthy to stop someone from expressing their grief. So when you go around telling people not to cry, what are you trying to say, you know? So that was a big thing for me. Some days, and you know, look, it's been 4 years, but just last week I cried completely. I completely broke down to a total stranger because the topic happened to come up. So it's not easy. Other days I'm like, okay, fine. I'm an orphan. That's cool. And some days it's just like my mind just can't. I can't wrap my head around it. It's completely insane. And Chunks has been very very supportive throughout. Um, in terms of coping mechanisms, I found counseling really helped me. And for those who have spouses, what happened to me was I asked Chunks to allow me to talk about them and for it not to be weird in a conversation. Because for me, talking about them or sharing memories helps to keep them alive in my heart. So I asked him to just allow me to talk about them. So sometimes we'll be sitting and I'll be like, oh my gosh, my mom used to love this song. And what I wanted from him is for him to not be like, oh, okay, that's weird. But for him to just be like, oh, okay, you know what, that's really great because it just makes me feel better to sometimes reminisce and remember nice things. Visiting their graves also helps me a lot. I don't get to go there often, but when I do go home, I definitely go to their graves. So because they died so closely apart, my dad's grave is like one spot, and then my mom's grave is like in the neighborhood, if that makes any sense, because they died so close together. So yeah, going to their graves helps me a lot. Talking about it, sometimes crying. To be honest, one of the best coping mechanisms is just letting it out, shed those tears, get it out of your system, and it really, really helps. So it does this. You know what I'm saying? Like one day you're feeling great, and then the next day you just can't get out of bed because it's just so tough. And there's no formula. There's no formula. There's no time limit to grieving. Some people say to me, oh, but it's been over 4 years. How can you still be crying? It's like, you have no idea. You have no idea. So anyone who's feeling under pressure to get over it, don't. People are talking crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. It's okay. It's okay to still grieve no matter how long it's been. Grief also creeps up in very bizarre ways. Like, you definitely feel the gap at every milestone. So every time I achieve something, I miss them. When I had a baby, I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom would have loved MJ. My dad would have loved MJ. Or every time I make a big step in my career, I miss having my dad there to say, you know what, I'm so proud of you. But at the same time, I'm so blessed because you know how God works. Had I not lost my mom, okay, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this was silver lining or anything like that, but had I not lost my mom the way I did and at the time that I did, I wouldn't have the relationship with God that I have now. And it's just brought me closer to him. So ultimately, you know, I suppose that's one good thing that came out of it. And the way God works, God saw fit to bless me with two other parents. I have Chunks' mom and dad, who I call mom and dad. So some people get confused when I talk about mom and dad. I talk about, those are Chunks' parents, they're mom and dad. My parents are mommy and daddy, if that makes sense. But anyway, I've got mom and dad. They're so incredible. They've walked with me on this journey from the time that they passed. At that time, we weren't even married. But mom and dad were there for me, and it helps to fill the gap for me. So when I see the relationship that MJ has with his grandparents, for me, it kind of it eases the pain a little bit. Mom and dad are amazing. They're so amazing, and I'm so grateful for them. So now, you know, the same way I would have been praying for my parents right now is the same way I pray for mom and dad. And sometimes I think if I hadn't lost my parents, maybe I wouldn't have the relationship with mom and dad that I do now. So those are just some things that just crossed my mind. I don't know. It's so difficult, but I mean, if we're gonna take away one thing from this video, I know it's been all over the place, and I'm a bit nervous. I was a bit nervous talking about it, but allow yourself to feel the feels, if nothing else. So many people have lost so many loved ones during this period, and it's okay. It's okay. Don't ever let anyone tell you how to grieve. You do what you need to do. Sometimes I need to be in bed all day and shed those tears, and that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does get better. By better, I mean you'll have good days and bad days, but it won't be a bad day every day, if that makes any sense. So in the beginning, every day was a bad day, and then in a week I'd have one good day, and then sometimes I'll have okay days. So that's what I mean. I don't think the pain ever really goes away. And when I've spoken to people whose like mothers and fathers died like 10, 20 years ago, they still say they still feel that pain, but they've just learned how to live with it. So that's basically what it's like. It's just like if you lose your hand, right? For a while, your body takes time to realize that your hand is missing, but eventually you do adjust. One of the most difficult things for me was the dreams after my parents died, because, you know, you're constantly, because like your mind hasn't caught up. You see what I'm saying? Like you haven't processed that they're gone. So like even these days, I'll have dreams where I'm sitting and talking to my mom, and in my dreams, I don't realize that she's gone. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh God, she's gone. So it's just, it's a journey. It's a journey. But I just want to encourage somebody out there. It's okay. And it gets better. And you'll get better. And do what you need to do for your healing. I'm going to end it here, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Hugs, hugs, hugs to all those who are grieving right now. I'm not going to say I understand your experience, because everybody's experience is different, but I'm standing with you. Those who are going through grief and need someone to pray with them, I needed to. Get in touch with me. Let's pray for each other. Let's just hold each other's hands as we're going through this period. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next episode of How Are You Feeling Really. Bye.